All right. Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive.
Yeah.
This time we're looking at something pretty interesting.
Yeah. Very popular topic, it seems.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a topic that I think a lot of people struggle with.
Definitely.
And are always kind of looking for better answers.
Absolutely.
So this time, we're going to be doing a deep dive into rapid fat loss.
Right.
And the source material you guys gave us was excerpts from the Rapid Fat Loss Handbook by Lyle McDonald.
Yeah.
And so, obviously this is something that you were interested in.
Of course.
And, I think it's pretty clear right off the bat that even the author, Lyle McDonald, kind of had some hesitation about even writing this book.
Yeah, he did.
And I think that's an important thing to note from the beginning because, he talks about the potential for misuse and the importance of, following his recommendations very specifically.
Right. He's not messing around.
Yeah, this is not a joke. This is this is serious stuff.
Yeah. If you're going to do this, you got to do it right.
Yeah, exactly.
And one of the things that he starts off with that I think is really insightful is he makes a very clear distinction between weight loss and fat loss.
Yes.
And those are not the same thing.
No, they're not.
And I think that's something that is often overlooked.
Yeah, it's easy to just think about the number on the scale.
Right, exactly. And people get so caught up in that number.
Whimper, yeah.
So he explains, when we talk about our weight, we're talking about everything, right?
Right,
We're talking about muscle, we're talking about fat organs, bones, water.
The whole 9 yards.
Yeah, your phone, your wallet.
Yeah, exactly. All that stuff.
Your keys.
But body fat is just one component of that.
Right.
And then he introduces this term lean body mass, or LBM.
Yeah.
And essentially, that's everything that's not fat.
Right.
So think muscles, organs, bones, water.
So if you took all the fat out of your body and weighed everything else.
That's your LBM?
That's your LBM, yeah.
And he gives some interesting, kind of comparisons.
Yeah. A really lean athlete
Mm-hmm.
might only have 5 to 10% body fat.
Right.
Whereas, somebody who's significantly obese, might have 40 to 50%.
Right, or more even.
Or more, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, kind of the average male might be 18 to 23% body fat.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
And the average female, 25 to 30%.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So, a huge range,
Huge range, yeah.
Depending on all kinds of factors.
Right, and this is why, focusing on the scale
Mm-hmm.
can be so misleading.
Right, because you might lose 10 pounds.
Right.
But is that 10 pounds of fat, or is it,
Right.
5 pounds of water and 2 pounds of muscle? And
Exactly, you don't know.
You don't know, yeah.
And he even, kind of takes a jab at the Tanita body fat scales.
Yeah.
Says they're not super accurate either.
Right.
So, it's really important to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Especially with this particular diet we're going to be talking about, because it does cause pretty rapid weight loss.
Right.
But a lot of that, especially in the beginning, is water weight.
Right.
So he says, you might see, 10 or even 20 pounds come off in the first couple weeks.
Right.
But a good chunk of that is water.
Is water weight, yeah.
So let's get into the diet itself.
All right, so this is the big one. This is what everybody wants to hear about.
This is it. This is the meat and potatoes.
All right, so break it down for us.
All right, so the diet is called a protein-sparing modified fast, or PSMF.
PSMF.
PSMF. That's it.
Okay, so that's what we're talking about, PSMF.
And it's a very low-calorie diet.
Okay, how low are we talking?
We're talking 600 to 800 calories a day.
Wow, that's very low.
Very low.
Yeah.
And it's predominantly protein.
Okay.
With very little fat and carbohydrate.
So it's not a keto diet?
No, he actually makes the distinction that it's kind of like a keto diet, but without the fat.
Without all the fat, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Interesting. You also get to eat pretty much unlimited non-starchy vegetables.
Okay.
And then you supplement with some basic vitamins and minerals.
Okay, so you're getting all the nutrients you need.
Right. You want to make sure you're not deficient in anything.
Right, of course.
And, one of the things that people might be thinking is, didn't some people die on diets like this?
Yeah, when you start talking about, extreme calorie restriction,
Right.
It's there's got to be some risks involved, right?
Yeah, and he actually addresses that head on.
Okay, good.
He talks about the last chance diet.
Oh, yeah.
Which was this crazy fad diet back in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, I remember reading about that.
And people did die on that diet.
Yeah.
But he explains that there were some key differences between that diet and the PSMF.
Okay.
The last chance diet was basically just this liquid protein concoction.
Oh, so it wasn't even real food.
Yeah, it was mostly collagen, which is a really poor quality protein source.
Right.
And it was also severely lacking in vitamins and minerals.
So you're basically starving yourself.
Pretty much, yeah. And that's why people got sick and died.
Right.
But the PSMF is different. You're eating real whole foods.
Okay.
You're getting high quality protein.
Okay.
And you're supplementing with vitamins and minerals.
So it's a much more balanced approach?
Exactly. It's much safer when done correctly.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, in terms of how much fat you can actually lose on this diet.
Yeah, that's what everybody wants to know, right?
Right. Well, it depends.
Oh, what?
Well, it depends on your starting point.
Okay.
How much do you weigh now?
Okay.
How active are you?
Okay.
Because those factors are going to determine how many calories you burn at rest.
Right. Your maintenance calories.
Exactly. So the bigger the gap between your maintenance calories and the 600 to 800 calories you're eating on this diet, the more fat you're going to lose.
Right, because you're in a bigger calorie deficit.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
So he gives an example of a guy who weighs 165 pounds.
Okay.
And let's say he's moderately active.
Okay.
So he's probably burning around 2,700 calories a day just doing his normal activities.
Right.
So if he cuts down to 800 calories a day.
That's a pretty big deficit.
Yeah, that's almost a 2,000 calorie deficit.
Wow.
So theoretically, he could lose about 8 pounds of fat in 2 weeks.
Okay. But that's theoretical, right?
Right. It's probably going to be a little bit less than that in reality.
Yeah, why is that?
Well, your body is going to adapt.
Okay.
It's going to become more efficient.
All right. Yeah.
And your metabolic rate might slow down a bit.
So you're not going to be burning as many calories.
Exactly.
Okay.
So to really understand why this diet works the way it does,
yeah,
we need to talk about the different nutrients that your body needs.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. So there are about 60 essential nutrients.
Essential meaning we have to have them.
Right. We need them to survive.
Okay.
And those include essential amino acids,
Okay.
essential fatty acids,
Okay.
vitamins and minerals.
All right. And so just to be clear, carbohydrates are not one of those essential nutrients.
Right. Your body can actually function without carbohydrates.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So let's break down each of those nutrient categories. First up, protein, which he calls the first.
Okay. So it's the most important.
Yeah, it's pretty vital.
Okay.
And the key thing to understand about protein is its role in structure.
Oh, okay.
It's not just about building muscle.
Right.
It's a crucial component of your hormones, your organs, your skin, your hair.
Pretty much everything.
Pretty much everything, yeah.
Wow.
And unlike carbohydrates and fats, your body doesn't really store protein.
Okay, so we need a constant supply.
Yeah, you need to be eating protein regularly.
Okay.
And protein provides 4 calories per gram.
Got it.
All right, next up, carbohydrates.
Carbs.
Carbs. Yeah, everybody's favorite.
Or everyone's least favorite, depending who you talk to.
So carbs are primarily used for fuel.
Okay.
They get stored as glycogen in your muscles and liver.
Okay.
And in extreme circumstances, they could be converted to fat.
Really?
Yeah.
I always thought it was the other way around.
Yeah, a lot of people think that, but you can actually turn carbs into fat. Yeah. And your muscles need glycogen for high-intensity exercise.
So if you're like a sprinter or weightlifter,
Exactly.
you need carbs.
You need carbs.
Yeah. Okay.
And in terms of calories, starchy carbs have 4 calories per gram,
Okay.
and fiber has about 1.5 to 2 calories per gram.
Which is pretty negligible.
Yeah, unless you're eating like tons and tons of fiber.
Right.
You don't really need to worry about the calories from fiber.
Okay.
All right, now let's talk about fat.
Fat, the other F word.
Yeah, the other F word.
Okay.
So with fat, he emphasizes that the type of fat you eat is more important than the quantity.
Okay. So it's not just about how much fat you eat.
Right. It's about the quality of the fat.
Okay.
So he breaks it down into 4 main categories.
Okay.
You've got trans fats, which are the bad guys.
Okay.
Those are found in processed foods,
Uh-huh.
and you want to avoid those as much as possible.
Right.
Then you've got saturated fats, which are found in animal products.
Okay.
And those aren't necessarily bad for you in moderation.
Okay. So it's not like all saturated fat is evil.
Right. Then you've got monounsaturated fats,
Okay.
which are found in things like olive oil, avocados, nuts.
Okay.
And those are generally considered to be healthy.
Okay, good.
And then lastly, you've got polyunsaturated fats,
Okay.
which include omega-3s and omega-6s.
Right.
And he mentions that it's important to get a good balance of those.
Okay.
If you're eating too much omega-6 without enough omega-3,
That could be a problem.
that could be a problem, yeah.
Okay.
And in terms of what fat does in the body, it plays structural roles,
Okay.
like in our cell membranes.
Okay.
And it's also our primary way of storing energy.
Right.
And all fats have 9 calories per gram.
Got it.
So they're pretty energy dense.
Yeah.
All right, next up, fiber.
Fiber. Okay.
Now, fiber is not technically an essential nutrient,
Okay.
but it's still really important.
Okay. Why is that?
Well, it helps to keep you feeling full.
Okay, so it's good for satiety.
Exactly. And it also helps to keep things moving smoothly in your digestive system.
Right.
And you find fiber in fruits, vegetables, whole grains.
Okay.
All right. And then we've got alcohol.
Alcohol.
Now, alcohol is not a nutrient.
Okay.
It's just empty calories.
And it can actually hinder fat loss?
Yeah, especially on a diet like this.
So maybe not the best idea?
Probably best to avoid it.
Okay.
And lastly, we've got vitamins and minerals.
Okay.
These are essential for a huge number of bodily functions.
Right.
And you find them in a variety of foods.
Okay.
But fruits and vegetables are particularly good sources.
Right.
And he also mentions other beneficial compounds found in these foods, like phytochemicals and antioxidants.
So it's not just about the vitamins and minerals.
Right. There's a lot of other good stuff in there.
Okay.
All right. So we've talked about the different nutrients.
Right.
Now let's talk about how your body actually uses them.
Okay. So how do we actually get energy from these
Well,
things?
your cells use a molecule called ATP. ATP, yeah, adenosine triphosphate.
Okay.
And that's like their direct energy currency.
Okay. So that's what our cells use to do their thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
But more practically, we get energy from carbohydrates and fat.
Okay.
Carbohydrates get broken down into glucose,
Right.
and fat gets broken down into fatty acids and ketones.
Ketones. Okay.
Yeah. And when carbohydrate intake is low, like on this diet,
Right.
your body starts to burn more fat for energy.
Okay. So that's the whole idea behind this diet.
Yeah, you're basically forcing your body to use fat for fuel.
Makes sense.
Now, he makes an interesting point about the brain.
Okay. What about the brain?
So some parts of the brain need glucose,
Okay.
but the brain can also use ketones for fuel.
Really?
Yeah,
So the brain can run on fat?
pretty much, yeah.
That's wild.
It is. It's pretty amazing.
Okay. So how does this work?
Well, when you restrict carbohydrates, your body goes into a state called ketosis.
Ketosis? Okay. I've heard of that.
Yeah.
So what's happening during ketosis?
Well, your liver starts to produce ketones
Okay.
from the breakdown of fat,
Okay.
and then your brain can use those ketones for energy.
So it's like a backup energy source for the brain.
Exactly.
Wow.
Now, there's an initial adaptation period
Okay.
where your brain is kind of switching over from glucose to ketones.
Okay, so you might feel a little weird at first.
Yeah, some people experience the keto flu.
The keto flu.
Yeah, which is basically just like headaches, fatigue, brain fog.
Okay, so not fun.
Not as fun, but it usually goes away after a few days.
Oh, okay, good.
And once your brain is adapted to using ketone,
Yeah.
it can actually get a large portion of its energy from ketones.
Wow, so we don't really need carbs.
Not really, no.
That's crazy.
It is, yeah. And this is why carbohydrates are not considered essential,
Oh,
because your body can actually make its own glucose.
really?
Yeah, through a process called gluconeogenesis.
Gluconeogenesis. Okay.
Yeah, it's a big word.
So break that down for us.
Okay, so basically your liver can take other molecules like glycerol from fat,
Okay.
lactate and pyruvate
Yeah.
from carbohydrate metabolism,
Okay.
and even certain amino acids from protein
Okay.
and turn them into glucose.
So our bodies are pretty resourceful.
Very resourceful, yeah. And this is where the idea of carbohydrates spare protein comes in.
Yeah, okay. What does that mean?
Well, when you eat enough carbohydrates,
Okay.
your body doesn't need to break down protein to make glucose.
Okay.
But when you restrict carbohydrates, like on this PSMF,
Okay.
your protein needs actually go up
Why is that?
because some of that protein is going to be used for gluconeogenesis.
So to make glucose.
Exactly.
Okay.
So what happens when you go into starvation mode?
Starvation mode.
So
Okay.
initially, your body will start burning fat for fuel.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. But the tissues that still require glucose,
Like the brain.
like the brain, yeah, they're going to get their glucose from gluconeogenesis.
Okay.
And unfortunately, the raw materials for that often come from breaking down body protein.
So you're breaking down your muscles and organs.
Yeah, which is not good.
No, definitely not what we want.
But the production of ketones helps to reduce the amount of protein breakdown.
Okay, so ketosis is actually a good thing in this situation.
It is. Yeah, it's a
You know?
protective mechanism.
Okay.
So how did we get to this PSMF approach?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, back in the day, they used to use therapeutic starvation for weight loss,
Okay.
but that led to a lot of muscle loss.
Right, because you're breaking down your body for fuel.
Exactly.
Okay.
So researchers started experimenting with adding back small amounts of carbohydrates or fats,
Okay.
that didn't really work.
It didn't prevent the muscle loss.
Right. And then they realized that protein was the key.
Okay.
If you give the body enough protein,
Okay.
it doesn't need to break down its own protein for fuel.
So the dietary protein spares the body protein.
Exactly.
Okay. And that's the whole principle behind the PSMF.
That's it.
Pretty cool.
It is, yeah.
He also talks a lot about omega-3 fatty acids.
Yes.
Like the ones found in fish oil.
Right.
He seems to be a big fan.
He is, yeah. And for good reason.
Okay. What are some of the benefits?
Well, he lists a whole bunch of them.
Okay.
Improved fat loss.
Okay.
Better insulin sensitivity.
Okay.
A stronger immune system.
Okay.
Lower risk of various diseases.
Okay.
And even a possible role in preventing diet-induced depression.
Wow. That's a lot of benefits.
Yeah, it sounds almost too good to be true.
It does.
But the research is pretty compelling.
Okay.
All right, so let's get down to the nuts and bolts of the PSMF diet.
All right. Let's do it.
Okay, so first you need to figure out your body fat percentage.
Okay. How do we do that?
Well, there are a few different methods.
Okay.
For really lean individuals like athletes, he recommends skin fold calipers.
Okay.
Bioelectrical impedance scales, like those Tanita scales, are another option.
Right.
But they can be affected by your hydration levels,
Okay.
which can fluctuate quite a bit, especially on a diet like this.
Right.
And for most people who aren't athletes, he recommends using BMI.
BMI. Okay.
Yeah, body mass index.
Right.
Now, BMI is not a direct measurement of body fat.
Right. It's just a ratio of your height and weight.
Right.
Okay.
But he explains that there are ways to use your BMI to get a reasonable estimate of your body fat percentage.
Okay.
Especially for non-athletic individuals.
Okay.
And he even includes charts in the appendix of the book
Okay.
that you can use to calculate your BMI.
So you just look up your height and weight,
Right,
and
yeah.
it tells you your BMI.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then there's another table that uses your BMI range to give you an estimated body fat percentage range.
Okay.
And from there, you can calculate your lean body mass.
How do we do that?
You just subtract your estimated fat weight from your total body weight.
Okay. Makes sense.
And he also gives you some more precise formulas in another table
Okay.
that you can use if you want to be more accurate.
Okay.
So once you know your body fat percentage, you can figure out which dieting category you fall into.
Okay. How many categories are there?
There are 3.
3. Okay.
And each category has different recommendations
For what?
for things like how much protein to eat
Okay.
and how often to take diet breaks.
Okay.
And if you're on the borderline between 2 categories,
Okay.
he says it's generally safer to err on the side of the lower category.
Okay. So be more conservative.
Exactly.
Okay.
And as you lose body fat, you might need to reassess which category you're in.
Okay. So it's not like you're stuck in one category forever.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Now let's talk about exercise.
Exercise.
Okay.
So how does that fit into all of this?
Well, he makes a distinction between resistance training and aerobic exercise.
Okay.
Resistance training, like lifting weights,
Okay.
is really important for maintaining lean body mass.
Okay. So it helps you hold on to your muscle.
Exactly.
Okay.
Aerobic exercise, on the other hand,
Okay.
while it's good for your overall health, doesn't really have a huge impact on weight loss.
Really? Why is that?
Well, because you're already in such a large calorie deficit.
Okay. So the exercise isn't really burning that many extra calories.
Right.
Okay.
And he even mentioned some studies that have shown less weight loss with added cardio.
Really?
Yeah.
It's counterintuitive.
It is, yeah.
Mm.
But he explains that it might be because people are retaining or even gaining muscle.
Okay. So they're losing fat but gaining muscle.
Exactly.
So the scale might not be moving as much,
Right.
but their body composition is improving.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the real benefit of exercise, especially weight training,
Okay.
is in influencing the composition of the weight you lose.
Okay.
You want to lose more fat and less muscle.
Right.
And he also points out that exercise can help to prevent your metabolism from slowing down too much.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
And might also make it easier to stick to the diet.
Because you feel better when you're exercising.
Right.
But he cautions against doing too much intense aerobic exercise. Okay, why is that?
Well, because it can actually worsen the drop in your metabolic rate.
Really?
Yeah.
So too much cardio can be a bad thing?
It can be. Yeah. Especially on a very low calorie diet.
Okay.
So he recommends prioritizing weight training over cardio
Okay.
for preserving muscle.
Okay.
And he gives some basic guidelines for both beginners and more experienced lifters,
Okay.
focusing on how often to train,
Okay.
the intensity, and the number of reps.
Okay.
And for cardio, he recommends sticking to mild activities,
Like what?
like brisk walking,
Okay.
for about 20 to 40 minutes,
Okay.
3 to 5 times a week.
Got it.
All right, now let's talk about protein intake.
Okay, so how much protein should we be eating on this diet?
Well, it depends on your activity level
Okay.
and your lean body mass.
Okay.
If you're mostly sedentary or just doing aerobic exercise,
Okay.
he recommends about 0.75 grams of protein per pound of lean body mass.
Okay.
If you're doing weight training.
He recommends 1 to 1.25 grams of protein per pound of lean body mass.
Okay, so more protein if you're lifting weights.
Exactly.
Got it.
And he recommends including dairy products
Okay.
for their calcium content and the potential muscle-sparing benefits of casein protein.
Casein protein.
Yeah, it's a type of protein found in dairy.
Okay.
Other good sources of lean protein include meat, fish, poultry eggs.
Okay, pretty standard stuff.
Yeah.
And unlimited non-starchy vegetables.
Right. Lots and lots of veggies.
Okay.
And he even provides a table of condiments and beverages
Okay.
that you can consume in essentially unlimited quantities.
Really?
Yeah.
So I can drink as much diet soda as I want?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Awesome.
But he does warn about hidden fats and carbs
Okay.
and things like processed low-carb products and salad dressings.
Right, so you got to read the labels.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right, now let's talk about why losing weight and keeping it off can be so hard.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy.
No, it's not.
And he talks about the body's natural defense mechanisms.
Right.
Okay, so what's going on there?
Well, your hypothalamus.
Hypothalamus.
Yeah, it's a part of your brain.
Okay.
It's like the control center for your weight.
Okay.
And when it senses that you're losing weight,
Okay.
it triggers a bunch of responses.
Like what?
Well, it slows down your metabolism.
Okay.
It increases your hunger.
Makes sense.
And it alters the levels of various hormones,
Okay.
like leptin, insulin, ghrelin, PYY.
Okay, so all these hormones are working against us?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And he emphasizes that your body seems to defend against weight loss
Okay.
much more strongly than it defends against weight gain.
Interesting. So it's easier to gain weight than to lose it?
It seems that way, yeah.
Okay.
And he also talks about metabolic adaptation.
Metabolic adaptation.
So your hormonal systems,
Okay.
including your nervous system and your thyroid hormones,
Okay.
can actually decrease your metabolic rate
Okay.
when you're dieting.
So you're burning fewer calories.
Exactly.
Okay.
And in the short term of this kind of rapid calorie restriction,
Yeah.
the sympathetic nervous system plays a big role.
Sympathetic nervous system. Okay.
Yeah. The output of your sympathetic nervous system can drop within just days
Okay.
of starting a severe calorie deficit.
Okay.
And that can lead to a decrease in your metabolic rate.
So you're burning even fewer calories.
Right.
Okay. So are there any ways to counteract these effects?
Well, he talks about a few things.
Listen.
One of them is the combination of ephedrine and caffeine.
Okay. I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's often called the EC stack.
EC stack. Okay.
And he presents the scientific evidence,
Okay.
citing studies that have shown it can increase metabolic rate,
Okay.
suppress appetite,
Okay.
increase fat loss,
Okay.
and possibly even reduce muscle loss.
So it sounds pretty good.
It does, yeah. But he also stresses the importance of safety.
Okay.
There were definitely risks involved.
Right. I mean, ephedrine has a bit of a controversial history.
It does, yeah.
Okay.
But he says that it's relatively safe
Okay.
when used correctly.
Okay.
And by individuals without contraindications,
Contraindications meaning?
meaning certain health conditions.
Okay.
So, for example, if you have high blood pressure
Okay.
or heart problems,
Okay.
you shouldn't use ephedrine.
Okay. So it's not for everyone.
Definitely not.
Okay.
And he also emphasizes starting with a very low dose
Okay.
and carefully following the recommended dosage guidelines.
Okay. So start low and go slow.
Exactly.
Okay.
And he also points out that the people who might see the most benefit from EC
Okay.
are often the ones who are most at risk.
Really? Why is that?
Well, because they're significantly overweight
Okay.
and they're more likely to have health problems
Right.
that make using EC risky.
So it's kind of a catch too.